You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. You're watching Force 13 live, more coverage on Hurricane Beryl after it completed some extraordinary feats over the last few days. Weakening has finally commenced. That happened earlier on, although it isn't going down without a fight, that is for sure. We're giving an estimated wind speed right now of around 145 miles per hour and a pressure somewhere near 946 millibars. There's a bit of a recon gap right now, but there are more planes on the way in there, and I think they'll be providing data before the next National Hurricane Center update, which is in an hour. Hurricane warning in effect for Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. Obviously, we've known about that for a little while, especially in Jamaica. The storm will be arriving in earnest. Probably around daybreak tomorrow, you'll start to get storm force winds reaching the east coast. And by late morning, it's going to be the full force of the storm, whatever strength it is by then, will be whipping across probably the south coast of Jamaica. And from there, we could still see a potential landfall as it traces across the island. It looks pretty certain that you're going to get some of the strongest winds, whether it's an actual landfall or not. And then it will continue through towards the west-northwest, passing the Cayman Islands, also with a high chance of storm conditions now, and then to the Yucatan Peninsula, where it could still be a Category 1 or 2. Some models still indicating that it might even be a Category 3 by that point still. It's a very difficult one to forecast, and the National Hurricane Center have been stating that many times in their update. The last advisory from the 5 p.m. full advisory there is getting closer and closer towards Texas in the long range, it has to be said, and latest model ensembles have become much more suggestive that the storm may end up being towards that northern side of that cone, and so it certainly puts that region into play. The latest GFS model has the Corpus Christi area and South Texas in general getting up to 12 inches of rain. Whatever happens there, the National Hurricane Center forecasting a little bit of strengthening, and they're forecasting there a 70 mile per hour landfall by day 5 there, and that is in Tamaulipas, Mexico, right at the end of that forecast. But we're mainly going to be focusing on the short term tonight and tomorrow, of course. We will be live throughout the whole part of chapter of this storm's life tomorrow morning. We'll be starting coverage at 6 a.m. Jamaica time, and we'll be covering the run up to landfall. Just a caveat about the time zones. Jamaica is different to all of the other areas around it. They're using Eastern Standard Time, so the current time there is just after 6 p.m. All of the other islands are using either Eastern Daylight Time or Atlantic Standard Time, which is, of course, 7 p.m. right now. So the wind field certainly has expanded when you look at that view there from the National Hurricane Center's last cone. Northern side especially, expansion of that wind field, and according to that, tropical storm force winds lingering just off the coast of the Dominican Republic to the west of the capital, Santo Domingo. We'll have a quick look at Santo Domingo right now, since we have a camera there, and you can see it actually is looking rather calm. I imagine that most of the rain bands have passed by now, but nonetheless, there's the viewpoint. So a decent look at that area. I'm just looking to see if we've got our Kingston cameras working. That doesn't look like it's working. That is, all looking around Kingston Harbour there. Of course, this area even could be close to a potential landfall site, of course, the capital of Jamaica, one of the largest, well, the largest population centre, second most largest being Montego Bay on the northwestern side, itself has a high chance of storm conditions too. And there's another look from the Royal Yacht Club there looking out, and it looks like it's been a very pleasant day in Jamaica. It's been hazy sunshine all day as for every time I've been looking at the camera, and so that's what we've been seeing so far. Of course, as expected, the storm is clawing down those miles, but given how relatively small it is, and especially on the western side, it's the onset of the storm will come up pretty quickly as it gets towards Jamaica in the early hours of tomorrow morning. Well, my name is Nathan Foy here in the studio. That's not me, that's our YouTube streaming interface. I was there somewhere before, but never mind, you don't need to see me. And I'm joined by Maury, Orlando, and Jose, who will be putting together their thoughts with me here as we continue to watch this storm, especially as the recon data comes in throughout the next couple of hours. And a viewer there just corroborating what I just said and saying that it was also very hot in Jamaica today. If you've got any comments or questions for us, put them forward to us live and we can take them on the air, providing that nothing crazy is happening with this storm that prevents us from doing that. The eye's been coming in and out there. It's been struggling. The eye temperature has generally been around the minus 30s, and when we were talking about it being like plus 20 this morning, a big change that has been, and it is in a state of flux right now. If we look at satellite estimates alone, it would suggest a wind speed between 130 and 140 miles per hour, but when you think about wind lag and what the wind speeds were earlier, we've put it a little bit higher. Incidentally, the eye is actually emerging a little bit again on the latest rapid scan frame, and we've just got a temperature of minus 22, so maybe another little change there, but we'll keep tabs on that real close. Let's talk to Orlando first of all, if we can. Recon on the way in. Your general thoughts on this storm? The inevitable did eventually happen, but it took quite a long time, didn't it?
Yeah, I did feel as though it was leading all up to this at this point. At first, I was very skeptical and wasn't sure before the Windward Islands if it even go up to 150, but it sure did. It sure did, and it did more afterwards. I thought it was going to begin weakening after the Windward Islands overnight. I thought it was going to be a brief, at most, if it was a lucky for historic purposes, it would reach Category 5 intensity, and then afterwards, next update, it'd be gone. So it just go into the history books. But instead, when I woke up this morning, it seemed to have maintained that, and for hours, it maintained that.
Yeah, not even a debatable Category 5.
Impressive. Yeah, it's crazy how that happened, and especially given the time of year as well. So all climatology so far has been pretty much tossed in the garbage. Best way I can put it.
Flung out.
And right now it's still holding up. It's still holding up even in the face of wind shear. And right now, upper air reconnaissance flight is still going around sampling the outer part of the system, and now I believe they're starting to sample the interior structure from the upper levels. So we're getting a lot of valuable dropson data that should be available and inserted into the NSET model runs come by midnight's release. So looking forward to that.
You talk about upper levels.
Not sure
what
if anyone has
kind of?
into 80s.
I'm sorry. What kind of height are they flying at there in those upper levels?
Right now, actually, I can go ahead and give you answer that question. Let's see real quick. They've been in there for quite a while today.
Yep.
They actually lowered. They were originally flying at about roughly 14,000 feet.
Okay.
And then afterwards, they descended down to about 1380, 1300.
Oh.
No, 13,850 feet. There we
Okay.
go.
Yeah, so still
Um,
around 14,000, but
so pretty high up. From the data points, it looked like they made a steep drop, but no, they're still pretty high up. I don't know what that was. Maybe it was some turbulence, but there was a
yeah.
brief period where they went really high up and then went back down low again. Got tossed around about 200 and something feet. So
Could well be. When I think of upper levels, I thought it would have been higher than that even. But 14,000 feet to get a sample of the upper levels of that hurricane. Of course, these hurricanes, when they produce these very high cloud tops, they can sometimes extend up to 50,000 feet, which means that even commercial airliners have to stay away. But still looking relatively impressive on this imagery right now. Maury, what's your take on this? I thought he was there somewhere around, but we can speak to Maury in a little while. But Recon still on their way in. Apparently they are nearby.
yeah,
Hurricane
there's two
Swifty.
reconnaissance flights.
Thanks very much for your membership upgrade. It's great to have you supporting us and on board with us here. We're doing our very best. We're keeping up the coverage, and we expect there's going to be tons more on the way. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was going to mention there was two reconnaissance flights apparently going into Beryl. I'm not sure exactly the coordinates of this other one. Doesn't say. It says it's in progress, so I doubt it's inside the system right now. But we should be having two reconnaissance flights within the hour, giving us data. So before the update, at least we should have input from one of them from the internal structure. Hopefully, if all goes well.
Yeah.
Honestly, looking forward to that. And also, I just noted that one flight coming from Biloxi, it seems as though they did a drop zone drop in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh,
Not sure if there was any like purpose
maybe a
besides
test.
testing reasons or anything like that. Um,
Apparently, one
very curious.
plane has just passed. Is passing the southern Dominican Republic, and is probably going in for a northeastern eyewall pass soon.
Yeah, looking forward
It'll
to
have
that
flown from
data.
St. Croix, won't it? So, or Puerto Rico. So it's just past south of Isla Leona, and is going to be in the northeastern eye wall soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be very interesting seeing the progress of that eyewall replacement cycle, which is coming very apparent both on satellite imagery as well as microwave. Um, will definitely be telling if both its current wind speed as well as its internal structure, which will determine the intensity it will be on its closest approach to Jamaica.
Haven't seen microwave. Don't suppose you've got any that you could show us?
I could probably send one over.
Yes,
Just give me a
please.
minute.
Really want to see what that microwave imagery is looking like. I can imagine it will be showing a bit of a fractured appearance there. Let's reiterate the watches and warnings that are currently in effect then. A hurricane warning then for Jamaica, Grand Cayman, Little Cayman and Cayman Brac, all the Cayman Islands. Hurricane watch for the south coast of Haiti from the border with the Dominican Republic to Anstahino on the western coast. Tropical storm warning for the south coast of the Dominican Republic from Punta Palenque westward through to Haiti and through to Anstahino as well. So the last advisory had 155 mile per hour winds still, although we fully expect, unless Recon conjures up something very strange, we fully expect that it will have weakened a fair bit. Satellite estimates are putting it close to 130 miles per hour, maybe a little bit higher. I reckon if I was going to make a guess on what they might find, I think it might end up being about 140.
I agree with that statement.
Yeah, that's Maury there as well. We've got some... let's see which one looks best. So microwave imagery here showing how the storm's presentation is looking right now. There's really very little out there on that south side and southwest side. A gap in the southwest there too, really struggling looking at that form, although still a lot of energy on that eastern and northeastern side.
Yeah, I think it really depends when this wind shear is going to lighten up, and maybe it has a chance to just hold on tight. Hopefully, the shear keeps on impeding on the system just for the sake of lower intensity by the point it reaches Jamaica. Um, Honestly, though, I'm very curious what the state of things are once they go in, though. Um, would be interested to see if that eyewall replacement cycle can actually be successful even in the face of this shear.
And we've just seen on this satellite imagery here, we've just entered nightfall over the storm on visible. So some final visible images there as it gets dark over the storm. And that's the last time we'll see it until tomorrow morning when it's on its final approach to Jamaica. It's probably making its very closest pass right now to the southern tip of the Dominican Republic. It's about 168 kilometers there, which is just over 100 miles. So definitely we'll be getting tropical storm force winds, and at 100 miles it will be probably not quite 60 mile per hour winds, probably getting winds in the 50s there on that southern tip. So some places will be getting impacted with tropical storm force winds right now. They won't be the worst that we've seen by any stretch, but nonetheless something to be aware of. It's Jamaica that we're most concerned about, where they are under a hurricane warning, and not just that, a major hurricane landfall, Category 3 plus, is on the cards. That National Hurricane Center forecast does indeed depict a landfall just after that 2 p.m. Forecast point, and so close to Kingston as well when we watch that, and then weakening to a Category 2 just after that as it passes through, or very close to, the Cayman Islands, more likely to pass south of there. But feel free to send in questions. I'm sure there was a couple that came in before. Start your message with Force 13 and it will tag us there. Will Texas be affected by Hurricane Beryl? Some part of it looks like it will, and I can't remember who it was in our chat. I don't know if it was you, Orlando, or someone else who was talking about the surf risk, and bearing in mind it's July 4th and all that, where
Go ahead.
where there'll be a lot of people taking to the coastline.
Yeah, honestly, it looks like there's going to be a huge risk of swells in the Gulf of Mexico once Beryl crosses over the Yucatan Peninsula into either the Bay of Campeche or the northwestern Gulf of Mexico. After that point, it's not sure exactly where its next destination will be. However, with all the heat going on with that ridge that's currently driving the storm westward, northwestward, it's very likely that there will be significant swells, very high risk of recurrence, and with all of the traffic towards the shoreline, it could be extremely hazardous.
Liban says, are we going to make a storm documentary for Beryl just like we did with Dorian? I can tell you that yes, we are. We already made a little feature just before that had a sort of a documentary feel to it there. But yeah, I imagine there's going to be something like that. What is the temperature in the eye of Beryl? As I've been mentioning, it's been hovering around the minus 40 range, well, minus 30 to minus 40 range. It is currently, it improved a bit earlier to minus 22. It's now back again to minus 31. So up and down quite a lot as the eye tries to poke through. But it is comparatively, compared to before, struggling, but still very strong. And I'm sure Recon will get similar numbers here. How big is Hurricane Beryl now compared to this morning when it was a Category 5? I wasn't actually checking the numbers. I don't know if any of you guys were, but certainly in our perception, it's the wind field's gotten bigger.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look at the imagery of this storm, it does seem like it's funneling out its rain bands, so that would cause the wind to increase farther away from the storm. Uh, y- some of the rain bands currently are crashing on the shores of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. Uh, and that might bring some tropical storm force winds to the island of Hispaniola, uh, and we are expecting that to continue for a few more hours. This storm does seem like one thing I do want to note, especially when it enters into probably the Bay of Campeche eventually, it will become a larger storm. It seems like.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Definitely more than what it was for the vast majority of its life. So, we are expecting this storm to have more widespread impacts from what we were expecting before.
Again, a view there over Kingston Harbour this evening, looking awfully calm ahead of this storm, and that is to be expected. We will only start to see things change here in the just before dawn. Probably we'll start to see things change, and certainly after daybreak. Hurricane Beryl is moving faster than this morning. Is it because of the high pressure in the east coast? What do we think? But you know what? It's not actually moving much faster. It's about the same speed. I don't know if it looks like it's going faster, but it's been pretty constant. It's been close to 22 miles per hour all day. And really, ever since it moved through the Lesser Antilles, it's been pretty constant, 20 to 22 miles per hour. Let's see what else we've got right now. Models have kept on trending farther north towards Texas. Any thoughts on that? The latest GEFS ensemble showing all kinds of hurricane scenarios for the coast of Texas, much more than I've seen so far. So I'm a bit concerned that we are seeing a substantial shift. There's a bit of a tug of war going on with the models at the moment. You've got the GFS and the Icon, which are now calling for the storm to reach Texas outright and make landfall there. And then you've got the European model and the CMC, the Canadian model, which are still calling for the storm to stay further south and hit, of course, northern Mexico and not really affect Texas very much, if at all. Certainly in the case of the ECMWF, I don't think it affects Texas at all. The hurricane models, though, when we're talking about some of the other ones, the HWRF, for instance, I think that's calling for a very early recurve, and that steering it straight towards maybe even Houston and eastern Texas. And the HMON going for northern Mexico. And then the new models, the HFSA, that is currently calling for very northern Mexico, I think. Just double checking that. I'm just looking on my other screen here. Yeah, very northern Mexico. And the HFSB is much further south, actually, an outlier, very close to Tampico for its final landfall. And it briefly gets to Category 1 hurricane status. But I tell you what, I don't. Which models actually perform best so far? That's one question I want to know.
It's the HWRF has performed the best so far. Yeah, when it comes to the intensity guidance early on with rapid intensification, it's performed the best.
Maybe the HMON?
The Legacy HWRF. Well, let me show you what this Golden Boy is forecasting. It's not pretty sight. Latest HWRF model is showing this. It is forecasting a major hurricane landfall over Cozumel and Playa del Carmen, Mexico, and then into the Gulf, becoming a major hurricane again on its approach to Texas, and it doesn't even get there within the 5 days, so the rest is up to your imagination. God knows what will happen there. I doubt this model's correct, though. It is forecasting a strong Category 4 for Jamaica, and that would be pretty crazy. A landfall as well.
Yeah,
that would completely obliterate the old record for landfalling storms in Jamaica. Yep. So that's the model that's been most correct so far, so good luck everyone. The Hurricane Lee says there's a 40% chance in the Eastern Pacific. Do you think it will form? It's actually 50% now in both 2 days and 7 days. I'm sort of with them really. It's a 50-50 on that. It doesn't look like it will get very strong, so it's a borderline case. Certainly, even if it does form, the Eastern Pacific is still on an absolute whimper when it comes to the start of this hurricane season. And if we don't get a storm in the Eastern Pacific in the next 3 days, it will be the latest start in the satellite era. As for the other system behind Beryl, Invest 96L, they've reduced the chances even further on that earlier this evening, down to 20%. So it's looking increasingly dire for that potential system, from their perspective at least. But good news for all of us where that system is not expected to be that back-to-back hurricane that we were looking at in earlier model runs when Beryl was just starting to take off. So a bit of good news there. Has Beryl affected the sea surface temperatures very much? That is something that didn't even occur to me. But I'll have a little look for you. Just gonna... Well, you can watch with me actually as I explore the Force 13 website on the sea surface temperatures. Let's see if we can see any little changes. Not really. Look at those sea surface temperatures, still very warm in the area. Maybe just slightly cooler where Beryl was approaching the Windward Islands, but we're still looking at minimums there of 27 degrees on approach to the Lesser Antilles. There was a little spot in the Eastern Caribbean that was over 30. That's not there anymore. But Beryl is currently over 28 to 29 degree waters. Past Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, it will stay close to that temperature, up to the Yucatan, and then into the Gulf of Mexico. A little bit cooler if it goes further northwest, but if it goes towards... You can't actually see that on the screen there, it's cut off. I can't fix that. But once it goes off the coast of Texas, those temperatures are very warm if it does go up towards that coast. And off Louisiana, just as an aside there as well, temperatures over 30 degrees, pushing close to 32. Very warm off the US Gulf Coast. Now, it looks like we've had some recon data, a little batch of data coming in of this plane, the NOAA 2, that is entering in the northeastern side of the eye wall right now. I think it's still got a little way to go. Let me just figure out where that is compared to the eye. It's at 16.55, probably, something like that. And it's 70 yeah, it's still got a long way to go, so it's still 110 kilometers away from the eye of the storm, and it's already getting hurricane force flight level winds there.
Yeah, they're about 2,500 feet in the air right now.
Okay.
So fairly close to the ground.
And what we're also looking out for is to see what kind of rain rates these things are producing. This storm is producing as the plane goes through there. Not sure what we're seeing on this particular chart, just that those flight level winds have been edging upwards towards 70 knots. I'm not sure what that SFMR is showing us, but some suspect ones, and then it's just been hovering around 45 knots. So interesting start. And we'll see what happens when we get some more data from that recon plane. Still a good 100 kilometers away from the eye, so it might take a little while for us to get more info, or interesting info. Latest eye temperature right now, minus 36 degrees Celsius. So again, eye temperature fluctuating. And that's usually just because of clouds obscuring the eye and moving around. But yeah, go ahead.
So I have some news. It seems though the 18Z ECMWF model has trended back a little bit stronger, more north, just south of Cozumel.
Of course.
Let me see this. Yeah, let me present.
I have a graphic of comparison I'll
Yes,
share.
please. We'd love to see that. Alright, let's see what this ECMWF model is saying then. So there it is. It is showing two scenarios. I'm guessing the one on the left is the new one.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. The one on the left is the new one, showing the storm is stronger and a little bit further north. It's just south of Tulum there at that landfall. I'm trying to decipher what that pressure's saying. Is it 988?
About 988. Yep. It's been having bad initialization, just similar to the GFS. That's been a recurring thing for about the last couple days.
Oh, it's been
Yeah,
horrid. It's been woeful.
Yeah, ECMWF has been having a problem with that.
Initialization has been worse than pointless on most of these models. That's probably why they've performed so poorly. We'll be getting news from the National Hurricane Center in less than half an hour. I don't know if those planes will get in there in time to get some proper readings, but we'll see how they do. But they'll obviously be looking into that data, and they'll make their call based on some of those direct observations that they get. It's the best thing we got right now, Recon. There's no real radar in the area from any of those ground sites. And obviously there's no one on the ground, no observation points. Maybe there might be one or two weather buoys out there, but I doubt they'll be anywhere near the eye. They're usually quite spaced out. There was one that was near the centre of the storm. Was it this morning or yesterday at some point that got some interesting observations. Latest eye temperature on satellite down to minus 42. So really getting down there. That's the worst temperature from the eye's perspective that we've seen since Beryl peaked. So it is well past its peak at this point, but still holding on to a lot of intensity. And from what we're seeing or hearing from those recon flight already, lots of more widespread winds. By the way, look at this. Looking closely again at this satellite imagery that we've got in front of us. Loads of gravity waves.
Yeah, those are the bands that move out from the center. I'm guessing.
And still a flurry of convection blowing up here and there, all encircling the eye. And let's face it, when Beryl was first forming, even to see this would have been something of nightmares and beyond comprehension, really. The fact that this storm managed to get to Category 5 status, and not only that, but probably 175 miles per hour, although not an official number, it appears that the data from this morning, or possibly from the recon gap when satellite imagery appeared better, may have well supported that, and I would agree. So both of these planes, I think, are heading into the eye wall and outer bands of this storm. So we're waiting for new data. Let's get some questions. Maneater says, how will Beryl impact the Cayman Islands? Once again, when we look back at the cone, you can see that they're forecasting probably a Category 2 to pass by you, very close. So it looks like you'll be getting hurricane force winds for all of the Cayman Islands. And of course Grand Cayman will be getting the worst deal out of that. And you could well see the highest winds of the storm going through you from the inner eye wall, depending on exactly where it tracks. If it does go south of that forecast, then you'll be in a little bit of luck. But the way it's looking right now, even though it will be weakening a little bit, it will still be a possibly high-end Category 2. And of course, for Jamaica, a major hurricane landfall on the cards. There haven't been many of those in history, you know. The strongest one being Hurricane Gilbert, and I'm sure many Jamaicans will remember that storm. A extremely memorable storm in Jamaica. And that was a storm that made landfall with winds of 125 miles per hour. So still an outside possibility that Beryl could hold on to wind speeds of 130 miles per hour and break that record. Another record that could go falling for a storm that is nowhere near the peak season. Gilbert, of course, being in September.
My goodness.
Let's get some more comments then. Any idea of the rain rates over the Dominican Republic and Haiti right now? I don't know about actual rain rates, but I know rain totals are actually going to be relatively light across Hispaniola, except for maybe the extreme western tip of Haiti there under that tropical storm warning. Could get over 8 inches there for 200 millimeters. As well as the eastern tip of Jamaica, similar amounts, but we're certainly not talking about an extraordinary rainfall amount from this particular storm. It's relatively small, it's fast moving, and so rainfall will be limited. Of course, one of the worst storms in this area probably was Hurricane Flora for rainfall, 1963. I think it produced 100 inches in either Cuba or Jamaica. There's an extraordinary amount of rainfall. What's that, 5,000 millimeters? 5,000 millimeters, I think that is. No, 2,500. I'm sorry, 2,500 millimeters, extraordinary amounts. What's the shear forecasted to be in the Gulf of Mexico when Beryl emerges from the Yucatan Peninsula, guys? What are your thoughts on that?
Not good news. That's what that's all I have to say.
Oh, there you go. Lower wind shear then.
Let me just make sure of that.
It's not just low shear, but also depending on that northwestern angle, that trough that's coming down may actually lead to help its outflow and maybe even enhance whatever is there. So it's a very at the bare minimum right now. It looks like it's indicative of at least an environment that would support some level of gradual intensification at minimum.
Yeah, I do see that there is a little bit of a gap in the wind shear that develops by Friday, July 5th, once this storm is exiting the Yucatan Peninsula. As the system moves towards the Texas-Mexico border, this system will likely experience somewhat of strengthening from these like systems, specifically the trough that will be coming down in that general area, which might fuel this system on approach to the border.
Do we think Beryl might turn north and make landfall in Cuba? That's a question there as well. It would seem rather very unlikely, I should say. But some parts of Cuba could get tropical storm force winds, currently hovering close to 30% chance in some of those exposed areas in southern Cuba. And is Beryl starting to overcome wind shear with its recent satellite presentation?
It's trying, but
well, you know what? The core actually looks more symmetrical than it did earlier.
Yeah, it's I think that eyewall replacement cycle, as well as it working on that western side, I think it's putting some emphasis on repairing up that western side of the system.
And it's doing it pretty well, I think.
Yeah, it is. Of course, the reason why the eye is no longer visible has not just to do with the shear, but mostly to do with the current eyewall replacement cycle going on. So We'll see what's going on with that and how fast it'll be completed.
And there's Jamaica for reference, just how close that storm is starting to get now. So it is continuing to approach. I'll give you some distance estimates in a moment. And I'm just looking at all the questions. I think I've answered most of those. Will the National Hurricane Center update the cone of uncertainty and move more towards Houston? It won't be at this upcoming advisory because it's an intermediate advisory, so not a full one. They don't update the forecast. They just do a position update. And what do models say about the 50% in the Eastern Pacific? The general consensus is it will be a weak, maybe a moderate tropical storm, and it will only graze the coast of Mexico, probably giving brief tropical storm force winds to part of the coast for a short time. Alright, let's take a look at some position estimates then, just to give you an idea. Although first of all, let me just tell you that the eye temperature is still at -40, so struggling. It is currently 167 kilometers from the southern tip of the Dominican Republic. It is 320 kilometers from Les Cayes on the west, near the western tip of Haiti. It is 522 kilometers from the eastern tip of Jamaica, and it's about 585 kilometers from Kingston, and it is 715 from Montego Bay. So that gives you an idea of some of those distances in kilometers. In miles, that's somewhere around 400, a little bit less than 400 miles from eastern Jamaica. And from the Cayman Islands, it's 1,061 kilometers from the center of the eye. That's just over 600 miles. And any interest in Mexico, Cozumel 1667, Cancun 1693. Still a little bit of time for you over there yet, and of course no watches or warnings for that location yet in Mexico. I imagine we'll start to see some watches maybe at the end of tonight, but probably tomorrow morning. I think we got some more recon data. Let's take a look at this. So that recon flight, the NOAA 2, still moving in from the northeast, looking at very large amounts of hurricane force winds at the flight levels. Very broad wind field by the looks of things. Here's another view of flight level wind, and certainly looks to me there, Orlando, 2 spikes in flight level wind at least, so a fractured eye wall.
Is that from inside the core yet? Because I know they were going by a band right now. It's that very thick band off to the
maybe they're
south
just
coast
the
of the
bands.
Dominican Republic.
Maybe
I know they're
just
pretty
the bands.
intense, firing up like negative 70, negative 80 cloud tops.
There's
Yeah.
AF302 moving into the northwestern side right now, so both of them are in there, and they've just got just over 55 knot flight level winds, and they're slowly creeping up there as well. Yeah, neither of them are in the actual eye wall yet, but they're both on their way in there, and they're both getting some strong winds. Nothing too exceptional or sensational yet, but we'll be right there when we see what happens. Can be a close one to see where they get there in time before the advisory. I don't think they will, looking at this. I think they'll be just a tad
I
bit
don't
late.
know. Maybe they'll delay it or do a special update.
Nah. Well, they can't delay it, but they'll do it if there's something really worth it. They'll do a special update.
Yeah.
We'll be here to find out what they come up with whenever that advisory comes out, and further recon data throughout the following hour. I think today is going to be a 2-hour stream, and after that we'll be throwing it back to the automated feed, which will run overnight, and we do expect multi-hour coverage or long coverage tomorrow of the storm's final approach to Jamaica. We'll be starting up at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Jamaican time, as it moves towards land. How much will Beryl's structure, when coming off the coast of the Yucatan, impact its course in the Gulf of Mexico? I'm not sure it'll impact its course very much. It's the ridging that will mainly be responsible for that. But I imagine, if the storm has a proper eye wall when it moves into the Yucatan Peninsula, it usually, a landfalling storm anywhere either induces an eye wall replacement cycle or shatters the eye wall, and whenever it moves back over the Gulf, it has to rebuild, and usually rebuild much larger and wider, and possibly not quite as strong as a result. But still, there could be the chance for significant intensification. I don't know whether they think it could be rapid at all, but certainly not in the forecast yet. As we've recalled, the latest forecast, they're still calling for a tropical storm landfall, a final landfall there in northern Mexico, but there is a big cone of uncertainty, and if it does move east along that cone, north and east towards Texas, that also gives it more time over water, very warm waters with what appears to be low wind shear.
I do want to go further into that, because I do understand that there is warm temperatures along the coast there of Texas. And if it does tap into that energy and makes a curve, if it makes a curve towards the northeast, then it'll spend even more time over those warm waters, and it could strengthen. Of course, there is wind shear, which will prevent its course, prevent it from strengthening as quickly as it would initially, as it would be expected to see with those warm temperatures. But with this system, you can see that there will be some intensification, especially with that sea surface temperatures along the coast of Texas and Louisiana. If it makes it more of a curve towards Louisiana, which is unlikely, it
One
may even get
ensemble had a landfall in New Orleans.
Yes, it did, but I think that's very unlikely. I think the most likely scenario is if it will head to like southwestern Louisiana. That's not most likely, just more likely than the New Orleans scenario.
By the way, tons of the United States today under heat advisories and excessive heat warnings, extending down to the coast of the Gulf of Mexico in Louisiana and in eastern Texas. And we got some tornadoes as well right now. A couple of tornado warnings active further north in the central United States. Do we think the eye wall replacement cycle will be successful? Because looking at satellite, it's beginning to get better organized again. Well, I can't fault that way of thinking there, because it is looking better on this latest satellite imagery, at least in its structure. The western side is blocked off any dry air intrusion by the looks of things, and even though it is still looking pretty narrow along that western side, sheer there, the core itself does appear to be consolidating, and we're at the mercy of that eye temperature. If it gets much warmer again, then could it be a possible re-intensification phase in when the forecast was for continuous weakening until at least after it passes Jamaica? It doesn't bear thinking about, I don't think. But right now, 145 miles per hour is what we're running with our latest estimate. Pressure 946, and we await to see what the National Hurricane Center make of that and their update. Their last update was 155 and a pressure of 943. We've not had any updates since then. But there's a new recon update.
Yes, there has been 105 knot winds recorded in the southeastern eye wall. The most recent scans.
What happened there?
Data. I'm not sure, really. Do you mean the unavailable data?
No, I mean, I would have thought the plane would be entering the eye from the northeast, and it looks like they've missed it.
That probably is because, like, a miscalculation of trajectory. they probably were aiming to move to the northeast, but the system uh, must be moving farther north than they expected.
No, I don't know about that. They it looks like they did turn halfway through the bands.
That is true.
Bit confused by
So,
that. And there's the other plane. This is live right now, pretty much, moving in from the northwest. So they'll both be quite close in proximity to each other fairly soon. Air302 and NOAA 2. Let's just go back to that NOAA data. That's the latest there. That left-hand panel showing the flight level wind. It looks like they just got a 115 knot flight level wind roughly. So a fair number, but we'll want to be finding something higher than that to justify the storm's current intensity. And a 100, about 110 knot SFMR. There's a flagged one that's higher than that, but obviously that's flagged. And the other chart there showing that the other recon plane is starting to get those higher winds as well, nearly 85 knots flight level winds. So the next passes on these two are going to be very interesting, but I think it will be just too late for the to get it in before that 8 p.m. advisory. That's Eastern Daylight Time, and we expect that to pop out at any time. This is Force 13 Live, tracking Hurricane Beryl once again on another night of coverage. And it is still writing the record books and writing its own script, I think, as a powerful Category 4, making its closest approach right now to the southern tip of the Dominican Republic, and then moving on towards Jamaica overnight. And once again, we got a few camera angles that we can show you. It's all dark now in Santo Domingo. And you can see the bright lights by the looks of things. A few cameras in Kingston as well, as it's getting dark there too. Still, it's been a very hazy day there by the looks of things, and still is. According to viewers, it's been a hot day. There is another viewpoint looking across the bay. And that's another shot looking out. I don't know these areas obviously, so I don't know exactly which direction these cameras are looking, but showing clearly that the waters there are very calm still at this point, as much as can be expected. But things are set to change very soon. By the time we get to daybreak, you'll be starting to see tropical storm force winds reaching the island. Just waiting for any extra info that we might get from Recon before the advisory pops out, but we're here looking out for any of that data. Gary says, is it true that the wind shear around Beryl has weakened and that they've heard it in other live YouTube chats, but don't know if it's true or not?
Well, I'm back, Nathan.
Welcome back.
Yeah, finally. I could take a quick look at wind shear. Probably this hasn't updated, but
Now we saw earlier on the ship's model that they were only forecasting a maximum of 20 knot shear.
yeah, I think that's what it's showing on my side. Yeah, 20 knots. Yeah,
20 knots.
yeah, 20. There's still like 40 to 25 knots, like west of it, like over Jamaica.
Now 20 knots of wind shear can be detrimental. Not always, it's a borderline number really. But looking at the storm right now, eye temperature's still minus 35, but really blowing up some cloud tops, wrapping all the way around it now, back into the minus 70s all round again. Really impressive on those latest satellite imagery frames. National Hurricane Center have updated, and they're sticking with 150 miles per hour now, so in between our number and their previous number. Pressure 943, so I don't think that'll have factored in any new recon data, but 1:59:43 on their latest update here at 8 p.m. We're waiting for further data on that. West-northwest movement at 22 miles per hour. We'll find out in just a sec whether, in fact, now Mexico has issued hurricane watches for the east coast of the Yucatan Peninsula from Chetumal to Cabo Catoche. The government of Belize has issued a tropical storm watch from south of Chetumal to Belize City. So, hurricane and tropical storm watches now in effect for the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula is the biggest news at this update. Beryl expected to bring life-threatening winds and storm surge to Jamaica on Wednesday and the Cayman Islands Wednesday night and Thursday. We haven't read out the hazards at any point so far, so I'll just read all this as well whilst we wait for more recon data. Hurricane conditions expected to reach the coast of Jamaica within the warning area on Wednesday. Winds expected to first reach tropical storm strength early on Wednesday, making outside preparations difficult or dangerous. Hurricane conditions expected to reach the Cayman Islands Wednesday night or early Thursday, and tropical storm strength starts on Wednesday. And of course the Yucatan Peninsula possible by late Thursday. Storm surge of 5 to 8 feet above normal tide levels in areas of onshore winds along the immediate coast of Jamaica. Storm surge could raise water levels by as much as 2 to 4 feet along the immediate coast of the Cayman Islands, and 1 to 3 feet currently forecasted along the southern coast of Hispaniola. Rainfall 4 to 8 inches with localized maximums of 12 across Jamaica and the southwestern Haitian Peninsula through late Wednesday, and it will also produce rainfall amounts of 4 to 8 inches with isolated amounts to 10 across the Barahona Peninsula in the southwest Dominican Republic. Isolated totals of 6 inches or more anticipated across the mountainous terrain in the central Dominican Republic. Flash flooding and mudslides possible. 2 to 4 inches with localized maximums of 6 over the Cayman Islands Wednesday into Thursday. Latest eye temperature looks like it's receding again down to minus 42 on the worst numbers that we've seen so far from the eye health point of view. Let's see if we can just get that NHC update map. There it is, showing those new hurricane watches that are in effect all along the Yucatan, and tropical storm watches down there in northern Belize. New recon data, it passed through the eye, NOAA 2, and they're now in the southwestern side. They got flight level winds. It looks like the data broke off for a bit. 115 knots. Southwest side looking awful. We only got a maximum of 80 to 85 knot flight level winds. And eye pressure looks to be 950 extrapolated. It's way up.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So that's probably a pressure of about 951 there, which is quite a bit above the 943 last time they were in the storm. And apparently northwest is much stronger. So we're gonna see data on the northwest in a minute. Apparently they're getting 145 knot flight level. Yep, they're getting some pretty strong winds there. Still category 5 force winds in the northwest flight level. And that would round to, well, yeah, probably still about 150 miles per hour there.
So, okay. It seems like the northwestern side is the strongest. Which makes sense, as that is where all the circulation is.
And here's a chart showing that last, the northwest one, the AF302, which went through the northwestern side, which is where the strongest winds have been recorded so far. 145 knot flight level, and a big spike there on the SFMR, but looks like there's a very high rain rate involved, so I'm not sure how that might factor in. Over 150 knots.
I'm seeing some lightning around the eye wall.
Lightning around the eye wall, always a good sign from a storm's
Yeah,
perspective there.
Yeah, I got another flash right now that just got picked up.
So we get all this data from these planes in near real time. The information comes in batches, usually around every 10 minutes. Still not sure about whether they fully got the eye or whether it was just a loss of data. That 950 millibar extrapolated did have about 30 knot winds, so maybe it's around 950 when it all comes, when you put all that data together. But certainly a much higher pressure by the looks of things, but the winds are staying strong, is what the recon seems to be coming across. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we can have a little chat. The JJ Doge Twins, thanks very much for your support today, and your first super on a live stream YouTube's told me about, so thanks for supporting us. How active do you think this season will be? Beryl already beat Emily and Dennis for the earliest category 4 and 5. Yes, it did. It's going to be a fairly active season. I don't think it's going to be as active as some people think. My estimate is going to be somewhere near 20 named storms. So that's just a general number there that we're giving out. But for more info, you can take a look back at our May prediction video. I don't know how much will have changed since then, but that's the best I can really offer you right now. Did someone want to come in there? I thought I heard a voice.
I mean, I was gonna just say it's just surprising how this storm is still, handling those kind of wind shears. Even though it kind of looks like, it's kind of weakening, but we just gotta wait until see what the next advisory tells us about what Beryl's up to.
Pressure weakening, but winds, I don't think, are weakening.
Yeah. I don't think wind shear doing that much to it. I don't know. I think it's either replacement cycle or is it just wind shear or both? I just can't tell.
Looking at that wind data from Recon, I don't think there's an eyewall replacement cycle.
There isn't.
But it is interesting that the southwestern quadrant is so weak, according to that pass that happened from NOAA.
I'm not sure it's been mentioned, but did you guys see that pass going on right now with the Air Force flight?
Yeah. What's your take on it?
Very impressive. I think it's very impressive. It's still maintaining. I think there's a wind lag. It's not weakening in correlation to its pressure quite yet. And it's still holding on for dear life against about 21 knots of shear right now.
Insane.
Personally.
172 kilometers from the southern tip of the Barahona Peninsula of the Dominican Republic, and is just starting to move away now, so it's just made its closest pass to the Dominican Republic. Haiti is next up. Some of the parts of Haiti there as low as 218 kilometers from the storm's eye, and Jamaica 513 kilometers to go before the storm arrives. So extremely powerful winds still in this storm, and again satellite imagery certainly looks to be improving too, and a new microwave pass looks quite interesting as well, much better than it was earlier. When we look at this, you seen this, guys?
Yeah. It's very,
Certainly
It's
looks
just
like a high-end Category 4 to me on that image.
yeah.
Oh wow.
It's just it's so weird,
It
like
looks like
how
it's
the pressure
yeah, it looks
is
like it's
so high, but the winds. It's just
I don't know. It might. I think it might be able to. If that structure is true, I think it'll be able to withstand this shear.
yeah, because
Oh
there's
joy.
I yeah,
And
because
that
I really thought
shows
that
that that possibly shows what the system might end up doing throughout the rest of its lifetime, through
I
once it
will also
reaches
like
the
to
Yucatan
mention.
Peninsula and also through the Bay of Campeche.
I want to just cut in for a second and just say that if that's the case right now, that western side that they've been sampling might be in recovery mode right now.
Mm.
If that
oh,
microwave imagery is true, I mean, I don't see what's stopping that from recovering.
it's just surprising how this storm is still fighting back wind shear that much. Like it just does not want to it doesn't want to weaken. It just want to stay strong. I never seen a storm like this before.
We're now joined by Cesar in Mexico, and part of your country now entering the hurricane watch zone. Your thoughts on Beryl right now, Cesar?
Hello, guys, and well, it's something interesting to see. The behavior of Beryl has been completely different from all the predictions that have been issued so far. So it's quite something to take note because, I mean, despite that, Beryl is expected to weaken substantially before making landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula, in part for the landfall in Jamaica, unfortunately. Um, it's also quite like impressive to see how this system keeps strong and very well organized despite the wind shear and the dry air that was expected to affect the system quite substantially today. So, well, I mean, let's see what happens. Of course, people in the Yucatan Peninsula, especially in the Quintana Roo and the Cozumel Island, are watching closely this hurricane because uh, it's now on a 3 day wait before it actually arrives those areas. But I'm still doubting about how strong or how weak this system will be because generally we've been fooled by this hurricane in about this intensity. So not sure. I mean, unfortunately, it's going to make landfall in Jamaica, and this is going to serve like a shield or something for people in the Yucatan Peninsula because it's going to weaken by that landfall. But
Or is it?
still,
Mm.
well, yeah, who knows? I mean, could make landfall, could not, but looks like, in my opinion, that it's going to make a direct hit or very close. But
Yeah, it does.
yeah, it's quite concerning. It's quite concerning.
I just hope that people in Jamaica are ready and already prepared because tropical storm force winds are going to be coming early in the morning of Wednesday around probably by 2 a.m. to 8 a.m.
All right,
Eastern
so we got a
time.
proper extrapolated pressure now, 947.9. So we're probably looking at maybe 949 there on that latest pass.
Wait, so wasn't
Still
it
a
at
higher
950?
pressure.
Now it went down to 947?
No, I don't think they properly got it the first time.
Okay. Because that got me a little.
That was the first plane which has already moved through the rest of the storm. The second one is now was the one that just got sampled. That. Let's go and but look at the chart that was posted on NOAA 2. Just want to point out there when it was moving through the northeastern side, huge wind field. Look at the southwest side, tiny, not much of that wind field there. And again, look at the charts. Look at how those winds have really dropped as it was moving through the other side of the storm there. That southwestern side, there's something really poorly about that part of the storm. And yet, in contrast, you've got the northwest right next to it, which is still producing up to 145 knot flight level winds. So a massive contrast there. What does that tell us, if anything?
I really don't know. To be honest, it's just I think Beryl's just telling us that it's not going down, no matter what it gets thrown at. But yeah, only land can probably, well, not probably, land can only weaken this storm.
Well, it's probably telling us really that there's a little bit of a gap in there, but it can't be much of one because it does appear to be improving as we look back again at satellite imagery here, with those darker colors wrapping around. Any black zones there are 70 minus 70 degree cloud tops, or lower. And the lower those temperatures go, the higher the clouds are, indication of the amount of energy that's in this storm and power. So still looking really substantial, wobbling quite a bit, maybe a slight westward jog, but still general movement is west-northwest I should say, and it's at about 22 miles per hour, which is quite a fair speed. Aidan Jones says, when could we expect rain in Jamaica? That's a good question. I think it will probably be just before it gets light, maybe 4 or 5 a.m. That would be my guess right now. Has the diurnal maximum been helping these nighttime intensification bursts? I don't know whether it might be that or not, but certainly improving right now. Big burst of convection there. You just wonder whether some of it might be the high amount of oceanic heat content that's underneath this storm too. Once again, I've been saying for quite a while that the areas around Jamaica have a lot of energy. It's the hottest bit of property in the Atlantic, actually, in terms of oceanic heat content. So that may also have a hand in it. What strength structure is safe with a Category 4? Says Harmonica. I've always heard that most structures built after like the mid-1990s are designed safe, but that's Florida. I mean, a lot of buildings are at risk when you're talking about Category 4 force winds. I would imagine that a lot of places involved in these Caribbean countries would have serious issues with Category 4s. Of course, Florida really had their wake-up call after Andrew, and I think they've just been really strict ever since that, haven't they?
I believe so, yeah. I really have seen a lot of brick houses being made now, and mostly along the coast of houses, getting built on, those stilts that keep them above storm surge. I've been seeing that lately around my city, to be honest.
Is there any lightning bolts embedded in Hurricane Beryl? I am pretty sure there are. We heard about it earlier. Is there a possibility that wind shear could lessen up and Beryl could re-strengthen to a second peak? I think you might be seeing that in real time right now. And has there been another eyewall replacement cycle today? Is it showing signs of one? I don't know whether it has or not. I don't know whether it's that some part of the eye wall has maybe fragmented over the course of today, and after it got hit by the wind shear, and it's coming back again, which might be what's happening when we're looking at that data. I don't think it was an eye wall replacement cycle in the truest sense. And does Beryl remind us of Dorian, as they both defied all odds that were against them when they were formed? I think with Dorian, it was late August. So even though it was still a surprise, this is another order of magnitude above Dorian, really. I suppose it is a surprise that Dorian managed to get as strong as it did, going really be up and beyond, right up to its maximum potential intensity. Which, by the way, Beryl's MPI right now is something like 175, 180 miles per hour. It was a little bit higher earlier on when it actually did peak, but it's still got a very high MPI, as most areas do in the Atlantic, though. And do we think Beryl cares about the shear at all? Well, I don't think so, looking at it. Still a caveat, though. The eye is still struggling for temperature. It is still at minus 37 degrees Celsius. It's still hovering around that minus 30, minus 40 here and there. Be interesting to see if we get it back down to the minus 20s. But I tell you what, it's with the cloud tops really blowing up all around it, it sort of matters less. And when you look at the overall, in fact, let me just check the ADT, because it must have gone up. It hasn't. It's still at 117 knots, but I imagine the automated feed there will increase. The advanced Dvorak technique with the, let me just check NOAA as well, and they are at 115 knots, so satellite estimates staying quite low. I would say that satellite estimates with this appearance, its increase, if we were using satellite alone, we'd probably give 140, 145 on this, but with Recon right now, it does sound like that it still justifies 150 miles per hour, which is what the National Hurricane Center did at their advisory, although that was just before they got that data. However, the pressure of the storm is higher. That means it is less deep than it was before, and it might mean... hold on, we've got an update here with the eye temperature. It is increasing again. It is down to minus 28. So the eye may be starting to reappear properly again. We'll just have to hold the phone on that and see if that becomes an established trend. But it certainly looks like 150 is the better call right now. Feel free to send in your comments and questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we can have a chat about that. I was just reading some of those comments, but if you want to bring anything to our attention, feel free to ping us on that. The NOAA plane that flew through the eye from northeast to southwest has already exited the storm and is turning now towards the southeast, and I imagine is going to position for another pass somewhere. They might do south to north since they're going in that direction. And the Air Force plane is still going through the southeast eye wall, which has still not a very large wind field compared to the northern quadrants, but it is a bit larger than the southwest. And they got winds in the southeast quadrant, flight level 110 knots. So it looks like both southern sides, both southern quadrants of the storm are really struggling, but the northern ones are really overpowered. 145 knot flight level on the northern side and a maximum of only 110 on the southern side, so very lopsided in that regard. And of course, whilst all that's going on, we're seeing that big flare up in convection on that northern side of the eye, which is probably something to do with why those wind speeds are so high. But there we are. I can hear myself. And what are the chances that it will make landfall in Jamaica as a Category 4? That chance is very much still on the table, and the crucial point about that is that if it did make a Category 4 landfall, that's never happened before. That beats even Hurricane Gilbert for the strongest landfall on Jamaican soil. Any chance Beryl will skim the north of the Yucatan Peninsula? Yes, it sure could, and that means it would have a lot more time over water and would be further east to really cause trouble for the US Gulf Coast. Some curious questions which I won't really get onto. Beryl looks like it's only having a little trouble with the wind shear. Well, yeah, it's not having a full-blown meltdown right now, that's for sure. The storm is still looking very good. Signs of intensification again. But right now the latest data is that we saw a 145 knot flight level wind. Pressure estimate close to probably 949. And Orlando, you've been away just for a few minutes there, but looking at all the data, did you expect it?
A part of me did, but a part of me did not expect such a quick completion of an IWAR replacement cycle. Not just a IWAR replacement cycle at all. I mean, that was expected. But a completion of one, given the environment and how bad it was, I was really hopeful. I mean, I would doubted it, but I was really hopeful that it would struggle. But apparently, it's becoming increasingly evident that's not the case whatsoever. Not only is it maintaining intensity, but also it looks like it's firing off new convection around that eye wall. There's a fresh, new, and even stronger and more pronounced eye wall based on the structure and core of it of microwave data that we have available. And based on reconnaissance, even though there are weaker sections of that eye wall, it looks like based on everything, it should rebuild. And that is the scary part for me. Because that means after passing Jamaica, not only will it hit Jamaica likely possibly slightly stronger, which would definitely take away Gilbert's record if it does indeed make a landfall. But it would also mean that there is a stronger likelihood that it will maintain intensity as it goes and approaches the Yucatan Peninsula, where it could even intensify slightly more. So still looking at a major hurricane across the board. And I'm uncertain if it will weaken enough by the Yucatan Peninsula to not threaten it with major hurricane force winds.
And that'll be people getting out their Emily comparisons as well then, won't it?
Yeah, it's really striking. I mean, we're looking back at this, and this storm, since its conception, has not behaved like any June, July, early season main development region cyclone. It's done everything but that. And it continues to do that. Even in the face, we expected the storm to weaken after it passed the Windward Islands. It did not do that. Instead, it decided to peak out as a Category 5 hurricane. We expected it to weaken now as it approaches and passes south of Hispaniola with between 20 to 30 knots of shear. Now that shear has decreased to about 18 to 20 knots of wind shear. And not only has it done an eyewall replacement cycle, which could have left some room for dry air intrusion into the core, which would have definitely weakened the cyclone and led to a potential opportunity of rapid de-intensification. Now that's gone. Here we are. Still a very strong upper echelon Category 4 hurricane that will be on its way to Jamaica in less than 24 hours. I think that's enough, you know.
Couple of drops on data coming in there. One in the northwest eye wall. Surface 132 knots. Is that gusts?
Let me see if it reaches to surface. Because if it does reach the surface, that means that's reliable.
As a sustained wind.
It would have surprised me.
Yeah, well, yeah, and a few others as well filtering in too. Just looking northeast eye wall, they got 98 knots at the surface. That's interesting. That's quite low. 967 millibars, so a little bit further out. And another one at the surface, in the eye, with a 13 knot wind, 949 millibars, so possibly 948 in there.
Yeah, that would sound about right. I think at this point it's a likelihood that the storm is either going to maintain or begin to deepen again, and to like equal out that wind to pressure ratio. I don't see why it wouldn't, given that it's treated like this shear is absolutely nothing.
If you go off the data,
There's nothing much else I can say.
it's possible that it got to about 951 and then has started deepening again now, but we won't know because the recon data may not have been fully accurate. But either way, sticking into the 940s again here, so it's staying very powerful, and clearly a Category 4 and a Category 4 status. It's going to be with us for quite a bit longer yet. And as time goes by, more and more likely that it will hold Category 4 into Jamaica.
That's just, I don't think it's easy to comprehend how wild this conversation is before even the 4th of July, before even we reached its peak intensity back in 2005, which is going on 20 years now, 19 officially. Yeah, it's a wild time going on right now with this season. I still personally believe we're looking at a very active to hyperactive season, but definitely looks like one of those years where it'll definitely be quality over quantity, unfortunately.
Do we think the National Hurricane Center is highballing how weak the storm is going to get? I'm not sure I understand the grammar of that question. Do we think I'm guessing the question is, are they forecasting the storm to be too weak in the later stages of the forecast? Maybe. I would forecast it to stay a hurricane all the way through the 5-day period, personally.
Yeah, I don't see it falling short. I mean, there's some models, but I think that I don't know what's convincing the National Hurricane Center to weaken it down to a tropical storm. I'm very curious what's their thought on the process. I mean, I don't see anything that would. The Yucatan Peninsula isn't high enough elevation to completely disrupt it enough it can disrupt the core. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't seem enough to disrupt the intensity to the point that would go below hurricane intensity, especially looking at it now, where it looks like it has a higher likelihood. I mean, if it's this resilient to this shear, and this is the worst it's going to get, when it comes to that shear, I don't know.
Just checking their last forecast discussion from the 5 p.m. advisory, they said nothing about why it was so weak into the Gulf of Mexico. Just that they forecasted a slight bit of strengthening near to hurricane status. So a big question mark on that one, and we won't know the answer until they tell us, perhaps in their next full advisory, which is at 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The Air Force plane continuing to fly out through the southeastern part of the eye wall. It's well outside of the eye wall now, back into the outer bands. Still unconvincing eye temperatures. It briefly got down to minus 28. It's now back to up to minus 20. It's now back down to minus 38. So very much fluctuating there, and I imagine a lot of cloud shifting around there, but certainly having a little spell. But of course, those cloud tops all around it, you got to factor that in as well. blowing up something pretty crazy there in those last few frames. A whole semicircle around that northern ridge of the eye wall.
I'm very curious if there's, by any chance, this shear is actually maybe enhancing the thunderstorm activity slightly, especially while we head into that diurnal maximum.
Well, it doesn't seem like it's strong enough wind shear, from what we have been seeing, to impact the storm heavily. So maybe it, so maybe it's helping the storm in some way by causing this its circulation to improve.
There was a question about wind shear. Is it expected to strengthen or weaken? Your guess is as good as mine.
I mean, it's expected to maintain, this wind shear is expected to maintain up to Jamaica and past Jamaica, but then afterwards there's a gap between the Cayman Islands and the Yucatan Peninsula where there is a chance of gradual intensification that most models hint at before going into the Yucatan Peninsula and beyond that. It does seem as though that the northern Bay of Campeche as well as the northwestern Gulf of Mexico um, would be favorable for continued, at least gradual intensification up to the northern Mexico or even southern Texas coastline right now.
And a new drop sond with 949 millibars with winds of 30 knots. So that will notch off a few pressure points as well. Possibly 947, 946. So
that is wild.
Sure appears to me as though it is once again deepening here.
Oh my
That
god.
that is wild. I honestly, like, there's very few times. Well, I mean, this last last decade, there's been a lot of intense hurricanes, and despite being an early season hurricane, this is definitely going up there and one of those that have actually genuinely surprised me. I anticipated a intensification phase towards the Windward Islands and even continued intensification just afterwards, but I didn't expect it to go into Category 5 and then afterwards just be able to relish in that and even have data points that would indicate in post-analysis of an even higher intensity. And now it's just continuing that intensification and maintaining that intensity right now at a strong Category 4 hurricane. It's wild, especially understanding that Jamaica, at least on record and satellite, there hasn't been any storm this intensity since Gilbert, which was in the 80s.
And in September.
Yes.
Yes says, have you checked the upper level dropsonde flight? It might show how strong the shear is.
Well, I'll look at that. I'll look at some of the shear up ahead that the storm is going to be moving into. A lot of that data is going to be translated into the models in the the 0Z model suite. So that'll be very interesting seeing how that takes things in. As well with these earlier recon flights this evening in the early evening hours, will definitely be helpful with that as well. So hopefully we get some clarity of what things are going to be looking like towards the Yucatan Peninsula and Jamaica in less than 24 hours. And maybe even some more clarity beyond that, whether the intensity of this storm will maintain enough where it may even be able to eat more out of that ridge. So, very, very curious.
What do we know about the Recon's plans for tonight then? Is it these two flights? Are there any more on the way?
I have not actually checked the Reconnaissance flight schedule, but I will be able to check up on that. I know there will be 6 fixes from Recon every 6 hours. So after these flights conclude,
right.
At least in 6 hours, there'll be something else. So probably more flights coming in during the very, very early morning hours.
So we're in good hands when it comes to that, at least. I can say that much.
Eye temperature back down to -44. That's the lowest we've had so far, despite all of this hubbub. But obviously the direct observations are telling us something pretty important, that the storm appears to be, at the very least, holding steady and possibly deepening again, at least a little bit, and indicating probably winds near 150 miles per hour and pressure somewhere around 946, 947 by the sound of that drop sond earlier. So once again, Beryl continues to impress, although probably not impressing the right people. There's a lot of danger involved in this storm, with extremely powerful winds, and as we've been saying, this could be, if it's a category 4 and makes landfall in Jamaica, that's the strongest landfall in Jamaican history. Hurricane Gilbert is the strongest at the moment at 125 miles per hour, category 3. Beryl could beat it in July.
I'm speechless.
Same.
And that's already after breaking a record for the most powerful landfall on the Grenadines, easily beating out other storms when it made a 150 mile per hour landfall on the island of Kirikou in the northern part of Grenada. Perhaps you could argue it was a little bit easier for that to happen, considering that early season storms tend to form at lower latitudes than later season storms, and I suppose if the conditions were just perfect, like they were for Beryl, that you would see a stronger storm further south than you would have done in the mid-season. Maybe that could be argued. Recon are flying in, NOAA 2 flying south to north as I expected they would be, so we're going to be getting another pass pretty soon, and that will be a very important pass, because if they get a proper eye pass and maybe a drop sond or two, we should get some more data and a clear marker on whether it is actually strengthening again. But having said that, the eye continues to disappear on satellite now, -48, which, isn't much of an eye anymore from that satellite point of view. But once again, Recon will take precedent here, what they can see on the inside that we can't see on satellite from the outside, and we'll have to wait and see what they get on another overpass. But certainly convection really blowing up on the northern side. Southern side right now, at least on satellite, is the weakest, so we expect that they'll find relatively weak conditions on that south side, although still hurricane force winds, and then into the northern side, which may well have the strongest winds right now. Anywhere around that northern semicircle could contain the strongest winds, so we'll be waiting with bated breath to see what happens to that. Looks like there was another drop sond in the southwest at 981 millibars, so that's quite far away from the center of the storm, but they got 76 knots at the surface. So just a little update. What were the largest and smallest eyes on record for a hurricane or cyclone? Well, there's a few contenders for the smallest eye on record. Patricia, of course, being one of the smallest, just a few miles wide. Wilma as well. Pinhole eyes there of just a few miles. And for the largest eye, I think the record still belongs to Typhoon Carmen in 1960. You've probably never heard of it. Its eye was 240 miles wide. Yep, that did actually happen.
A very, very small eye, for sure.
What, 240 miles?
I mean, it's the size of Hurricane Andrew, basically.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the size of Beryl, I suppose. I mean, 240 miles The central core of Beryl is only about 110 miles, so think of it being double the size of that black area around the eye.
Im-
Incredible.
Imagine, yeah, imagine how many tropical storm Marcos could
Oh,
fit
don't
on that eye.
stop that.
But yeah,
I think of Hurricane Danny as well, also had a tiny eye because it was a tiny storm too. Anyways, James says chances of Beryl being a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. I would say those chances are pretty high, even though it's not being forecasted by the National Hurricane Center. What's the strongest hurricane within the past 10 years? Patricia is the answer. If you mean Atlantic hurricane, then I would say it's Dorian. And what about Typhoon Winnie? That eye almost the size as Yes, Winnie did have a very... It depends though, because it sort of had an eye and an eye wall within a larger eye and eye wall. Although I suppose it didn't last the whole period, so Winnie had a massive eye. So chances that Beryl will peak for a second time from Danilo. Well, the way it's looking, it sounds like we briefly had a weakening of the storm, and it may just be strengthening again a little bit. So it does look like we're about to see a second peak, whether that's now or whether it's in a few hours. Dorcasaur, fascinating name, and thanks very much for your support this evening. What's our personal favourite storm that we've tracked? I don't always like to say favourites because it gives the impression that it's a positive thing, and I don't really have any. Only ones that I'm sort of nostalgic about because they were early in my tracking days. Storms like Hurricane Bill in 2009. That was the first major hurricane that I properly tracked. So that one I always look back on quite fondly, and Typhoon Choi Wan that season as well was the first typhoon I tracked. So, and the 2009 typhoon season in general, which was a horrid one for the Philippines, is one that I always remember. And what are our thoughts on the 145 knots SFMR that Recon found? They found some very high SFMRs earlier. I'm not sure what to do with that data. Some of them were flagged, but there was one over 150 knots that was unflagged, but there is a massive rain spike in that, so I'm not sure about that. The AF302 still exiting the storm out to the southeast, so it's going to be a little while till we get some more proper data out of that. Fallen Ice says, where was Patricia on the top 100? They didn't see it. I can't remember, and we've done a few top 10s and top 100s, so it gets quite fuzzy. We don't actually have an official list. Maybe we should, but Patricia, I don't know. And it's hard to rate storms. There's so many different parameters, so many different quirks and situations in which one storm could be put as more notable than another. I don't really know what to say about that. What is our take that the National Hurricane Center missed out on Beryl's peak today at 4 a.m.? Well, it looks like it, didn't it? The satellite peak actually was probably at around 2 a.m. And then a little bit later on, it was just... and then when Recon came in, it looked like they were finding that the storm was weakening. So that's why we estimate that the peak of the storm was 175 miles per hour. And that's the analysis that we will be going with into the post-storm analysis. Has lightning been seen inside the storm? I assume so. I don't actually know, but I'm sure there's plenty of lightning in there right now. Abel says, do smaller hurricanes intensify faster than larger ones? All depends on the storm. Some of them don't intensify, of course, but smaller ones always have a better chance. Phoenix says, is this undergoing an eyewall replacement cycle? Well, Orlando told us earlier on that an eyewall replacement cycle did happen and it was completed in record time once again, just like the first time around. And when will Beryl dissipate? That's a great question, Vincent. We all want to know when Beryl will dissipate. If it goes straight into Mexico, northeastern Mexico, it could be in 5 days. But it will probably last longer than that. Maybe 6, maybe 7, maybe even 8 days if it goes to Texas. How much rainfall will Haiti get, and will it cause flooding or landslides? It's quite possible. The western tip of Haiti could receive 8 inches of rainfall. That's 200 millimeters, maybe more. Just like the eastern coast of Cuba as well, of Jamaica as well. Cuba not so much. But certainly we could be looking at landslides in all of these areas as the storm moves through. But in terms of rainfall, compared to other hurricanes, it is definitely not up there in terms of rainfall. Wind is, though. Is Beryl moving too fast despite its powerful winds to suck up enough oceanic heat content for it to be lessened for peak season and future hurricanes? I think I just about understood the question. It probably is. I don't think it's going to make much of a dent on sea surface temperatures in general. It hasn't so far. Lance says, should the use of recon in the Western Pacific come back? I for real think that Haiyan was more than 195 miles per hour at peak. From a scientific perspective, wouldn't it be wonderful? But American citizens will want to think about it. Tax dollars and all that. It costs several tens of thousands of dollars every time the hurricane hunters take on a mission. And obviously that comes out of the public purse. And so you've got to balance that in. And it's always been about budgets. And that's why they suspended Recon back in 1987 in the Western Pacific. I guess they just didn't think it was worth it. But from a purely scientific perspective, we would love it. We would love as much of it as possible. More and more they send in unmanned planes. They send drones into the storms now sometimes to get readings. And I think we'll be seeing more of that in the future as well. Unmanned flights. Perhaps that might be a good cost-cutting measure. Will Beryl re-strengthen? Well, it looks like it might be, although I'm not sure. The eye continues to disappear on satellite imagery. Right now, eye temperature is minus 54, but the cloud tops around it are still pretty scintillating, really, well into the minus 70s and possibly minus 80s. Coloxius says, do we think in post-analysis that the authorities will adjust Beryl's peak to 175 miles per hour? I think they should. I don't know if they will. It looks like Beryl is strengthening quickly again, especially in the later infrared frames there. Maybe it's a tough one because the cloud tops are cooling, but so is the eye. So it sort of feels like it's on a level. It's been on a level here, but Recon are getting us more proper data, and obviously their information is much more valuable. They are about to reach the eye again. NOAA 2 is just about to enter the eye from the south, and you can see there it's been getting some strong winds again. Got to 972 millibars on its way in so far, and it's gotten category 2 force flight level winds. That will increase shortly. And just checking out that latest chart from the NOAA 2 plane as well, and you can see those winds getting up again, that top left panel, and on the top right where they're getting SFMRs into above 105 knots, 110, so indicating there that probably category 3 winds, and they're still not in the inner eye wall yet, I don't think. So there'll be some more interesting data to come out of that shortly. The Air Force plane scooted out towards the southeast earlier after they got that 949 millibar extrapolated, and have turned north now, so they're going along the right hand side of the storm. They're either going to go halfway and go from east to west, or they'll go all the way up and then they'll do a northeast to southwest pass again. So watch that space. We'll find out in about 10 or 20 minutes what they decide to do. But the other plane entering the eye probably right now, and we should get a good indication of any update on the strength of this storm. But really, huge amounts of convection blowing up all around the eye of Beryl, and once again looking suspicious and monstrous as it continues towards Jamaica, Category 4. More questions then. Fallen Ice says, would we ever go on a recon mission? I know they have a press pool where we could probably sign up for that. I don't know if we'd ever get on a recon flight, but they do have that. I wouldn't say no. I would absolutely go for it, yeah, personally. Supernova says, do we think it's mid-level shear affecting Beryl is why the eye is closing despite the cloud tops? We've seen this before back in 2020 with Hurricane Delta. I genuinely don't know the answer to that, but I would imagine it's probably not wind shear. Another comment there, every time the sun sets or rises seems to be when Beryl looks to intensify. I don't know if that's... I haven't noticed that, but you may be right on that. And what is the channel's predicted intensity when or if it makes landfall on the Yucatan? So our estimates are, well, our forecast would call for a high-end Category 2 at the minute for landfall in the Yucatan, and for it to remain a hurricane into the Gulf of Mexico. Do we think Beryl will peter out to a Category 2 or 1 before it hits Jamaica? Well, wouldn't that be nice, but it really doesn't look like that's going to happen, I'm afraid. It is going to stay very strong, and I think we're guaranteed a Category 3 landfall or close pass to Jamaica tomorrow morning. Karma says, if it should go towards Houston, would it exacerbate the previous flooding, or has the area recovered fully?
What year are they talking about?
I was just wondering, which flooding? Are we talking Harvey, or are we talking...
yeah, I was going to say either Harvey...
What happened earlier this year with the severe weather?
I think Karma's talking about Harvey, because that's the only known flooding that I know from a hurricane. I haven't heard any other flooding in Houston, so...
I mean, there was significant flood damage in Houston from Harvey, but there has been a lot of recovery. Houston's still going strong. Unlike New Orleans, which lost a significant amount of population and commerce following Katrina from flooding, Houston's still okay. That being said, there was a severe weather incident earlier this year. That was a derecho that resulted in hurricane force winds blowing out a lot of skyscraper windows and causing significant damage in the city. Now, it's too early to say how much of a northwestern turn this system will do once it crosses the Yucatan Peninsula. That being said, definitely worth keeping an eye on. I mean, if it does end up going that way, in the currently unlikely scenario, but if it does, probably looking at some level of flooding, but I'd be more concerned about storm surge as well as winds versus flooding.
Fallen Ice says, have we ever worked with the National Hurricane Center, and if not, would we? I don't know if they'd want me, but I've been to the National Hurricane Center a good 10 years ago now. And we've spoken to a few people in the weather community, the people who run IB tracks. We were in had a little discussion a couple of years ago about the Western Pacific reanalysis that we did. But would I? I'm not sure I would even, because I just think it might be a bit constricting. We can sort of let ourselves loose a little bit more with our opinions here, and I think that if it's in check, it's a good thing. What is the longest number of days for a hurricane? I assume you mean longevity. I can't even think what the answer is at this point. Longest day for an Atlantic hurricane.
Wait, what do you
There's
mean?
plenty of contenders. I know that Ivan was a long time one of the biggest days producers. Of course, it had a round two.
Was a hurricane in it wasn't like a Cuba hurricane, very long-lived cycle?
Oh, the San Kiriako hurricane, that lasted forever. That was 31 days.
Wasn't there
That
another
is the
hurricane?
record for days. Yeah.
Wasn't there another hurricane
Also-
that moved up into the subtropical region of the North Atlantic? Did a
Hurricane Nadine.
counterclockwise? Did a re-counterclockwise? Something like that.
Recent
the
or
name of it.
old?
Old.
Was it not Nadine? Helene? No, Ginger. Hurricane Ginger.
I think so. I kind of
1971
forgot.
lasted, I think, for 22 days.
Yeah, I did.
I think it's
Absolutely
that. I've
did.
seen it in one of the videos of Weird Strange Tracks.
Yes.
I forgot the name and the year, to be honest.
I think you'll be talking about Ginger if it was
Probably.
if it was named.
Might have to relook again.
Anyways, apparently Vortex data message says closed eye wall. Not especially surprised by that. Could Jamaica get a Category 5 equivalent storm surge even if Beryl is no longer a Category 5? They're only expecting, well, I say only, but they're expecting up to 8 feet of storm surge, which isn't Category 5 proportions at all. Mainly due to the storm's small size. When we think of Category 5 storm surge, we usually think of maybe 16 feet, maybe in excess of that. And if you recall, Hurricane Dorian was about 23 feet. Incredible storm surge from that storm. So no, this is only probably a Category 2 storm surge from this storm. But of course it will be bringing along extremely powerful winds. Dorkasaur, thank you for your support. This is for the smoke alarm battery replacement. The beeping is driving me balmy. What smoke alarm battery? I didn't hear any. Unless
I don't hear any.
I don't know, but I know my chair has gotten awfully squeaky over the last few weeks, so maybe it's that.
Well, I can't hear that. I really
I don't
can't.
hear nothing.
I don't know. Latest satellite looks like the eye is beginning to pop out again. Reminds me of when it re-strengthened after the eye wall replacement cycle before the Grenadines. But still, the eye itself isn't properly popping out. It's just made to look better because the cloud tops have really blown up. The eye temperature is minus 54 right now. Pretty poor. But obviously those cloud tops are really shoring it up. I was just looking for another. I was just about to read another comment and it just missed again. The YouTube chat sometimes just scrolls me out the name. Looks like the storm is getting bigger, or am I seeing things? Well, it probably is getting bigger the whole time, really. We zoom out and look at the whole picture. The central core of the storm is still rather small. We got to remind ourselves here when we blow up that imagery and look real close. Try and give you the best view of it. But in reality, the storm size isn't actually that big. The main core of the storm is about 100 miles wide, 160 kilometers. So it is fairly wide, but when we think of other hurricanes, which are double, maybe triple, as far as hurricanes go, it's not huge.
I just noticed how closer and closer Beryl's getting towards Jamaica. Every minute that I'm seeing, it's just getting closer.
Yep, there it is. We switched the camera a little bit there, and you can see Jamaica. You'll start to get your first high clouds appearing soon, I think. And then possibly the odd rain shower from some very outer fringes, maybe in about 6 hours, maybe a little bit more. Apparently, we've just had a 136 knot flight level, 128 knot SFMR. So that's nothing too special, and 948 millibars extrapolate. That's from NOAA 2. That's the one that was flying from south to north there. I say nothing special, I mean compared to what we saw earlier, those numbers are down a little bit. And the pressure there, 948.4 extrapolated, so still upper 940s there in terms of estimated pressure. I feel like Beryl is in a proper battle right now, trying to force itself to strengthen, and at the moment looks like it's only really holding. A comment there as to whether we can see the rain cams in Jamaica. Well, they're just cams, there's no rain. Jamaica is still awfully dry, and according to some in the chat, it was very hot there today. I was looking at the cameras at various points. It's been hazy, definitely. Lots of hazy sunlight today. But, of course, it's going to be all changed tomorrow. Well, the storm is still heading for Jamaica with serious power. Still a Category 4 at this point. Just got an update from the Air Force plane, which is still flying north out east of the hurricane. So, pretty serious stuff here. And we're still finding more and more data from those planes. But I think we'll actually be finishing up shortly, because we wanna, I think we'll be doing another video update at the next advisory, the 11 PM update. And I think we're gonna pool our resources for that. And nonetheless, we will be going live for a very extended stream tomorrow, starting bright and early at 6 AM Jamaican time, Eastern Standard Time. That's 7 AM for everyone else. Interesting time zones over there. Any thoughts from our team right now?
To be honest, I'm just still shocked at how Barrel's still holding on to its strength, even though it's fighting back wind shear a lot, and it's still it's still showing how impressive it looks like.
Definitely, it's a really odd system. It reminds me also with Hurricane Ian quite a few years ago with the same scenario. It battled a lot of wind shear and still managed to become a really powerful hurricane. And here it is, Beryl, battling wind shear, being the earliest Category 5 ever in the history in the Atlantic, and still maintaining a very powerful intensity going towards Jamaica. So really, Beryl wants to break more records, unfortunately. It's impressive.
David has joined us at the wrong moment. David, we're wrapping up here.
Yeah, I know. I've been here. I just come in, and she remains monster, and still very impressive system, but plenty more coverage to come.
Yeah. Yeah, it might feel a little bit odd that we're stopping there when Recon are in and around the storm, but I think we're going to be going for a standardized update at the next National Hurricane Center Advisory, and we want to be up and at 'em tomorrow morning when the storm makes its closest approach. We will be going live, as I said, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which should give us a good 6 hours or so before the storm makes landfall to really digest what's going on and the progression of the storm as it starts to affect the island. But in the meantime, once again, I'd like to thank my team for joining us tonight, and those who are watching and supporting our coverage as well. We appreciate it a lot, and we're doing this hell and high water. We'll be here. Hurricane Beryl, still a very powerful storm, Category 4. Somewhere around 145, 150 mile per hour winds, pressure in the 940s. If anything really big happens, we'll be back at some point. But check the channel for new updates, social media, and we'll be throwing it back to our automated stream now, which has its own interface and presentation there, which should tide you over for the overnight hours. As of now, Beryl, a Category 4 storm, and holding its own against that strong wind shear, and could still be near this strength by the time it reaches Jamaica in the morning. Stay safe, hurricane warning in effect, hunker down, and it's going to be a long Thursday for, is it even Thursday? What day are we on? Wednesday. It's going to be a long Wednesday. I don't even know where I am anymore. What day are we on? It's Wednesday. Going to be Wednesday for Jamaica, and that completely screwed over our music there at the end. You know, we're trying to have a little bit of presentation here. Good night. We'll see you soon.